Learn English through stories.
Franz Schubert. The story of the boy who wrote beautiful songs. One might say of Schubert that he was born with a spring of melody in his heart and a song on his lips. Schubert composed many kinds of music, but his songs are most loved by everybody. They are sung all over the world. And just because he never let a song come from his lips that did not first come from his heart. Schubert's full name was Franz Peter Schubert. He was born in Vienna, in a very simple house that looks quite old-fashioned. Over the doorway there is a bust of Schubert, a few inches high. And a sign on the house says, Franz Schubert's birthplace. At that time the great American authors Washington Irving, James Fenimore Cooper, and William Cullen Bryant were all boys. You may not know so much about them now, but some day they will be quite as good friends as any you will ever make. Even though these boys were a little older than Franz Schubert, let us always think of them together. Then, of course, we should think of Schubert together with the composers who lived when he did. Sometimes we find it quite hard to take one piano lesson or violin lesson a week. But from the time when Franz Schubert was a very little boy, he had lessons every week for violin, voice, and piano. A little later he began to study harmony with a very famous man who knew Mozart. His name was Antonio Salieri. With so many lessons and with schoolwork just as we have it, Franz must have been a very busy boy. He was quite poor and often very hungry, but in spite of that he was always good-natured and full of fun. At 11 years of age he became a singer in the chapel of the emperor. It was here that Salieri was director. Franz sang in the choir until he was nearly 17. Then he became a schoolmaster because, of course, he had to earn his living. Wherever he was, Franz was thinking music and composing it. Once he wrote a song called The Serenade at a table outside an inn. Once Schubert was seen by his boyhood friends busily writing a new song. So quick did he write that the ink was hardly dry on one sheet before the next one was done. He was writing the music to a beautiful fairy poem by the great German poet Goethe. The poem is called The Erlking, and tells how the fairy Erlking chases a father who is rushing on horseback with his dying child in his arms. Finally, just as the father reaches his courtyard, the child dies. It is a beautiful song sung by the greatest singers. Goethe, the great poet, is not known to have met Schubert. He paid little attention to his music. Sometime you will learn about Joseph Haydn, who died in Vienna when little Franz was 12 years old. Papa Haydn, as he was called, was music master in a famous family called the Esterházys. Well, Franz Schubert also lived for a time with the Esterházy family. He was piano teacher to the children of Count Johann. Franz was then 21 years old. A good friend of Schubert's was Michael Vogel. He was a famous singer, who did all he could to make Schubert's songs known. They took little vacation trips together, and were good companions. When you read more about this singer's friendship for Franz Schubert, you will like him for being so kind to one who had very little pleasure in life. Once when Schubert and Vogel were enjoying a vacation tour in the mountains, Franz read Scott's Lady of the Lake, which was printed in the year 1810, when Schubert was 13 years old. Schubert set some of this poem to music. A fact you will remember when you read it in school. Perhaps you could remember at the same time that Scott was a little older than Schubert, and just 1 year younger than Beethoven. Beethoven lived in Vienna at that time, and Schubert with 2 friends went to see him. Beethoven was very deaf, and those who met him had to write down what they wanted to say with a large pencil, such as is used by carpenters. Schubert was so modest and nervous upon meeting the great master that he could not even write his replies. Once when Schubert was very ill, a friend sent him some books to read. They were the last of the Mohicans, The Spy, The Pilot, and The Pioneer. Schubert had music in his mind and soul all the time. It is said that one of his favorite walks was down by a mill, where he was inspired to write some beautiful songs. Vocabulary words. Melody, a sequence of single pitches that is perceived as a single, cohesive entity. A tune. Jolly, full of high-spirited gaiety, joyful and cheerful. Composer, a person who writes music, especially as a professional occupation. Opera, a dramatic work in 1 or more acts, set to music for singers and instrumentalists. Harmony, the combination of simultaneously sounded musical notes to produce a pleasing effect. Director, a person in charge of an organization, department, or activity. Serenade, a piece of music sung or played in the open air, typically by a man at night under the window of his beloved. Choir, a group of singers, especially one that performs church music or sings in a choir. Compose, create, or write music or a poem. Accompany, to play a musical instrument or sing in support of a soloist. Poet, a person who writes poems. Fairy, a small, magical creature with human-like qualities. Busily, in a busy manner, actively. Modest, having or showing a moderate or humble estimate of one's merits, importance, etc., free from vanity, egotism, boastfulness, or great pretensions. Nervous, easily agitated or alarmed, tending to be anxious or apprehensive. Deaf, lacking the power of hearing or having impaired hearing. Modest, having or showing a moderate or humble estimate of one's merits, importance, etc., free from vanity, egotism, boastfulness, or great pretensions. Inspired, guided by a divine influence, arousing feelings of enthusiasm and creativity. Clavier, a keyboard instrument, especially one with strings such as a harpsichord. Soul, the spiritual or immaterial part of a human being or animal, regarded as immortal.